Morning. I'd like to call the Kankakee County Board meeting for November 13th to order. Today's invocation is from Carol Weber.
Dear Lord, we thank you for our blessings and opportunities to serve you. We are grateful for the many people who seek for the good of our county and work daily providing services and actions of help. We pray for those suffering from natural disasters and from illnesses and from addictions. In our efforts for the people of the county, Lord, we pray for wisdom. We pray for good counsel, for strong insights, for patience, for a helping spirit, for kindness towards others, and for the integrity to fulfill your will for each of us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty. If I could, please get a roll call for attendance.
Mr. Tripp. Present. Mr. Washington. Present. Mr. Legess.
Present.
Mr. Vickery.
Present.
Mr. Olthoff. Mr. Hess.
Present.
Mr. Tholen.
Present.
Mrs. Polk.
Present.
Mr. Mulcahy.
Present.
Mr. Snipes.
Present.
Mr. Byrne.
Present.
Mr. Seroy.
Present.
Mr. Lear.
Present.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Present.
Mrs. Weber.
Present.
Mr. Reinfeld. Mrs. Peters.
Present.
Mrs. Evans.
Present.
Mr. Payton.
Present.
Mrs. Parker.
Present.
Ms. Dunbar.
Present.
Mr. Ritter. Mr. Kinzinger.
Present.
Mr. Fairfield. Mr. Zenz. Ms. Haas.
Present.
Mr. Wheeler.
Present.
Quorum.
We have a quorum. Under public commentary, I have a few. 9:03. We have 15 minutes for all of the public commentary. The first up is Wendy Menigo from St. Anne. Just a moment.
Get me out of here.
There you go.
Hi, I'm obviously here because of the Highland Road Solar Farm is up again, or now we're calling it the Sandy Hill Farm. I don't know. The reason I came today, though, and I didn't bring any troops with me, the reason I came today was to thank the members who consistently voted with the people. What you did was show everybody that when everybody gets together and submits their concerns and does their thing, that you as the county board listened. And we really do appreciate the folks who consistently voted with the people, not one time, but 2 times. Now this thing is up again. And I just found out that, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have the troops here because we're divided. There are some who said, you know what, Wendy, they've already voted on it twice. That the board has said what they're going to say, and they're not going to change their mind because they know how we feel. There are other people who are on the fence now because the developer, which is a good thing, because you voted no, the developer went back to all the people and he ran around trying to make everybody as happy as he could possibly make them. And if it was something that had to happen, which these people over here say it's never going to happen anymore because you already voted twice that it wouldn't, it's something that they could live with at this point. But not everybody feels that way. Now I just found out this morning when I walked in that what was said at the ZBA meeting that they're going to put an access road and they moved it 3/4 of a mile over. You don't even know this yet. That access road is not on the property. So now you have an issue that it needs to be sent back again because, well, hopefully you'll vote as you should vote, but it needs to be sent back if not, because that road, that access road that he's claiming he's going to use is not on that property. You want me to read it? I'm taking up Mike's time. This is from Robert Bowen. He's the guy whose farmhouse was right there on the corner. My name is Robert Bowen. I reside at Highland Road. This is one of the proposed sites for the new solar farm. It's been brought to my attention that individuals who attended the recent zoning board meetings, that Mr. Brukowski has made some statements, erroneous statements. In his presentation, he stated that in order to appease nearby property owners close to the site, that he would move the site to the east end of the field. This is a distance of about 4,000 feet. When asked how he would then access the site, he stated it would be accessed by the current sand road on the site. The problem is with that statement is the alleged access road is not on the property in question, but lies on the adjoining farm property and is not available for his access or use. I know this because I farmed the land involved for over 30 years, and I am very familiar with the property lines and the owner, Robert Bowen. So there's that. But that wasn't my original thing. My original thing was to come here and tell you guys thank you so much for voting with the people. I would like to suggest that maybe you could find some protocol, and I know you don't need any more work, but everybody is very confused as to why you voted for Highland Road, and I'm glad you did, and not Moment, and not Bondfield. I was very upset with the fact that you had to state your reasons why you voted with the people, which you totally are allowed to just say, I'm voting with the people. But if I was from Moment or Bondfield, I would want to know what the heck the difference was. And maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but what made the difference between Highland Road and Moment and Bondfield? I don't know if it's the whole lottery thing and you know those sites will never be built. I wish that would have somehow been available to the people, because it would have saved a lot of people a lot of heartache and a lot of stress and aggravation. But once again, I just want to say thank you so much for the ones who consistently voted with the people all the time. Thank you.
Kim Bacon from, it's like Kankakee. Maybe Bradley.
Hello. I wanted to be last, not second. Hello, my name is Addie Adonai Perez. It means the Lord is my God. I have lived and worked here in Kankakee County most of my adult life. My parents brought me here as a toddler when they came to Illinois to work in the corn packing factory in Milford. We moved many times as a child back and forth between Mexico until my grandmother died in 1983. I met my husband here in Kankakee when I was 17. Our families both knew each other. He had found a good concrete construction job, and we married at St. Pat's on April 18th, 1992. We lived with my sister-in-law and her family until I had my first child, Alejandro. We found our own little home close to our church, where I also routinely cleaned for a little extra money. I was happy as a wife and a mother, but we needed more money, and I got a job at a local restaurant as a dishwasher part-time. My husband's mother took care of my son. My husband and I still work at these same jobs for almost 25 years. I have had two other children, a girl who's studying to be an X-ray technician at KCC, and my youngest son who's just finishing up junior high. Alejandro is the assistant manager of our local auto parts store. Both my husband and myself are undocumented, as we were brought here as very young children, but we both grew up and graduated from Kankakee High School. It had never been a problem. We've had a blessed life. In this state, you can receive a driver's license without a Social Security card, so we both have a valid driver's license and consider ourselves Americans. We've been a part of this community basically all of our adult life. We have paid income taxes every year using our taxpayer identification numbers issued by the IRS, and we give to our parish regularly without fail. But now everything has changed. We know many, many people from our neighborhood and St. Pat's who are terrified of being deported back to Mexico, where we don't really know anybody anymore. If we want to become documented, we have to leave our home, friends, and children and jobs for a minimum of 10 years, and then reapply for citizenship to our own home, which we own. I cannot even believe this. I have never broken any law, nor has my husband, nor any of my children. I am told that the laws have changed. I wanted to come and speak to the community leaders and to plead for a solution. I know many of my friends who have been deported for driving without a proper taillight or without a regular driver's license. But today I am here to say many of you actually know me. My daughter went to her senior prom with your son. My oldest son married a woman whose family owns a local bakery that's been here for years. They are doing well. My youngest son has a paper route and delivers a local paper to your porch regularly. I cannot explain the changes in law to him. We have always taught our children respect, but I recently learned of a zero-tolerance policy of President Donald Trump against all Hispanics. We are hated and not wanted here any longer. But I refuse to believe this. I am here to ask you, I hope I don't cry. Do you think I'm a criminal? A bad hombre? A drug smuggler? A rapist? A member of MS-13? A violent criminal? I beg you, please, tell me how to fix this without losing my home, my children, my job, but most importantly, my freedom. Tell me what I should do. I beg of you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Michael, it's like Morian from Highland Road.
Yeah, Wendy read that paper for me.
Okay, thank you.
I'm good. Thanks a lot.
Barbara Soricelli from Evanston.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Soricelli, and I'm speaking on behalf of a number of people from my parish community in Evanston, St. Nicholas Catholic Church, who has a large number of immigrant people there, our brothers and sisters. Some of these people are likely to have family and friends who will end up in such an ICE facility that's being proposed here. Regardless of how humanely you plan to run this facility, it still would need to comply with ICE regulations. And that would mean no family visits, no outside recreation, no legal representation provided, and they would need to pay a full bond if eligible for bond. So we're worried because most immigrants who are here without papers have been here for at least 10 years or more. And for many of them, there is no good way to obtain legal status. They're stuck. These are productive members of our society, not criminals. We believe it is a cruel policy to continue to sweep up otherwise law-abiding family members and make a profit from them, and then continue to expand this practice even further. We worry that you will be creating an infrastructure that will require more and more immigrant bodies to fill it in order to make it useful in going forward. And it is that kind of road is that the kind of road that anyone of us want to go down? Unless we are in the business of turning incarceration into a main industry of our state, we're embarrassed to learn that your community might resort to such practices in order to secure economic well-being, because it means that we have neglected to reach out to our state legislators to learn how we might help Kankakee receive what it needs in order to be a more economically vibrant community. So we ask that you oppose the expansion of the Jerome Combs Correctional Center and end the housing of ICE detainees for profit. We've also heard a comment that in Joliet, they rejected this project because it was not to their economic advantage and it would not provide the number of jobs that they thought it would. Thank you for your listening.
Juan Hernandez from East Chicago, Indiana.
Yes, my name is Juan Carlos Hernandez, and I am the immigration coordinator with Chicago Religious Leadership Network on Latin America, and I am the son of a man who came here without documents and was a productive member of society, and eventually, back in the early 80s, was able to regularize his status because the laws were different then. However, we know we're in different times. I come here to representing CRLN, that's the name of our organization for acronyms. We're 22 congregations from the Chicago area, and I'm reading a letter from our executive director. Dear board, as people of faith and conscience, we are grounded by the best of our religious traditions and sacred writings. That foundation and those words call us to stand up for justice, to practice mercy, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. This comes from knowing that love is the greatest law, that love should shape our world, and more specifically, our neighborhoods and communities. This is not about cheap sentimentality, but about creating a country where every person is valued and treated with the inherent dignity given to them by their Creator. The birth of our country was founded partly on these principles. We have known for some time that Kankakee is holding detained undocumented people as part of the process of deportation. The federal government hopes to expand the Jerome Combs Detention Center to hold even more people, thereby increasing the amount of money that Kankakee County would receive from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We believe it would be immoral to place profit above the legitimate need of people to support themselves and their families. Please listen to the better part of yourselves, to the better part of this country, and your faith in it, to do what is right and just. Try to imagine yourself as one of our brothers and sisters who are truly innocent of any crime except for the desire to provide for their families. They are not criminals. They broke a law which exists on paper, but which is badly in need of reform. The work that undocumented people do forms an essential part of our economy, and their taxes help pay for services we all enjoy. However, current immigration law does not recognize this. Instead, we criminalize them and try to force them into the shadows. Our country needs their work, but does not value their full humanity and dignity. We, the members of CRLN, ask you to stop the expansion of the Jerome Combs Detention Center and end the housing of ICE detainees for profit there. Please help us end this immoral immigration detention system county by county. And I just want to leave this letter and some petitions with you.
Is there a motion to extend for 5 minutes? There's one more comment. Mr. Mulcahy, Mr. Payton, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Rachel, is it Human from North Evanston?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Rachel Human, and I'm opposed the building of yet another ICE mass detention facility for two reasons in particular. Firstly, ICE's rampant violations of human rights, from substandard conditions to inhumane treatment, have been documented by the media and human rights organizations, and are the reason that legislators and these human rights groups are calling for a defunding of ICE. Secondly, the great majority of those being incarcerated today are not criminals, because being undocumented is a civil rather than a criminal offense. But as was mentioned, we've been criminalizing everyone. Instead, they are our neighbors who open businesses and provide jobs, who pay taxes, and who enrich our culture through the traditions they bring with them. Does Kankakee really wish to be known as a community in collusion and by implication consensual with ICE and its practices? and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you. Moving on, under certificates of appreciation, I have Deborah Ball for 20 years in the assessor's office. We're here. Eric, you want to do it back there? The mic? Okay, yeah, let me do that.
Morning. Yeah. Thank you. Debbie has been the mapping coordinator for our department in the assessment office for 20 years. And if you think back to all of the developments that have come through in the last 20 years and the things that she's had to do to keep the map proper and the way that it should be presented. When she started, GIS wasn't even here yet. And to her credit, even though she started, was it with CAD?
No, I started with ink on Mylar.
Well, I mean, but your background was in CAD, and yeah. When we migrated to GIS and the different tools that are there, she was able to transform herself and continue to move forward with what today's map looks like. And without her efforts, GIS wouldn't have its base layer. So the work that she does far reaches past what the assessment office can even do. So I think it's appropriate to take a moment and thank Debbie for her service and everything that she's done in the last 20 years. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention too, the last couple of years she's been a really great mentor to the newest member of our staff, as he is learning to be her understudy, and she's done a tremendous job mentoring Colin Wood, so that the mapping department is left in great hands once she does decide to step aside at any time. So thank you very much, Debbie, for all you've done, and I look forward to continue to work with you in the future here.
Thank you. I've not enjoyed every day of it, but I've enjoyed most of it. And it has been a challenge to go from ink on Mylar mapping, which is antiquated, of course, now, to the CAD, but it's a very good thing, and so many members of the community use the GIS map that it's amazing to me. And thank you.
Thank you. All right, and from the Sheriff's Department, 20 years, Robert Schultz. Robert here today? There. Want to come up here to the front? There you go.
Hiding in the hallway.
License. Say a few words. You're on.
I don't even know how you put it in words. Somebody that have been doing what Rob's been doing for the last 20 years. He has a very difficult job that changes every day. We've had several transitions he's been part of that he's spearheaded, and he keeps a lid on things. And then he's just a solid employee, and we're blessed to have him, and we hope for another 20.
I'm just very appreciative to Sheriff Bukowski and Sheriff Downey for giving me the opportunity to excel in the workplace. Continue to try to do my best effort to develop the younger generation and kind of leave it in good hands, hopefully when I leave in 20 years. But I'm very appreciative for the opportunity, and will continue to serve the best I can.
Before we move on, I do have to mention, gentlemen in the back by the door, we have to keep that clear because of the fire code, so you either have to find a seat or go in the hallway. Apologize for that. Minutes of the last meeting from October 9th. I need a motion to approve the minutes. Mrs. Parker, second. Mr. Washington, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. The Claims Committee reports. First, I'll take a motion to approve the claims. Mrs. Peters, second, Mr. Vickery, and we can get those right into the record, please.
To the Honorable County Board of Kankakee County, a committee to whom it was referred, the monthly County Collector's Monthly Report for the month of September 2018. Total cash and investments, $17,744,398.53. The Highway Fund for the month of September 2018. Highway Fund, $228,125.05. All other funds, $1,055,108.52 for a total of month of September 2018 of $1,283,233.57. The General Fund, $2,358,961.30. All other funds, $4,248,143.61. Total for the month of September 2018, $6,607,104.91.
Alrighty, we have a motion and a second. That requires a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Tripp.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Legess.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mrs. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Under department reports, I need a motion to combine and accept the reports. Mr. Byrne, second to Ms. Dunbar. Can I get those read in the record, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
County Treasurer's Monthly Report for September 2018. Total cash and bank and investments, $17,744,398.53. The Coroner's Monthly Report for September 2018. Total calls 109. Coroner's cases 19. Autopsies 9. Toxicology 9. X-rays 1. Cremations 42. 9 incomplete. Total income for the month of September 2018, $3,952.50. Circuit Clerk Cash Book for the month of September 2018. Total dispersed $301,421.10. Recorder's Monthly Report for September 2018. Disbursement fees paid to County Treasurer, $126,626.94. County Clerk's Monthly Report for September 2018. Total fees, $19,602.20. Animal Control Monthly Report for September 2018. Total fees of $27,306, and the IPTIP Building Fund, $258.55. The Monthly Building Division Report for August 2018. Total permits, 109. Fees of $36,472. Total extra fees of $4,385 for a total of $40,857. The November 2018 resolution for future taxes for properties sold at auction is on file.
Excellent, thank you. We have a motion and a second. It's a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under committee presentations and resolutions, is there anything that needs to be removed to be discussed separately? Ask again, anything to be removed and discussed separately? Alrighty, then I'll entertain a motion to combine and approve the consent agenda. Mr. Seroy, Mrs. Evans is the second. If we can get those read in the record.
The appointment of Carol Weber to the Kankakee County Animal Welfare Advisory Commission. The appointment of Laura Weber to the Kankakee County Animal Welfare Advisory Commission. The appointment of Abigail Smith to the Kankakee County Animal Welfare Advisory Commission. the reappointment of David Romaine to the Clawson Park Drainage District, reappointment of David Bergdahl to the Kankakee County Regional Planning Commission, the reappointment of Jeff Jarvis to the Kankakee County Regional Planning Commission, the reappointment of Chad Miller to the Kankakee County Regional Planning Commission, the reappointment of George Washington Jr. to the Kankakee County Regional Planning Commission, the reappointment of Gene Rademacher to the Kankakee County Zoning Board of Appeals, the reappointment of Stephen Lear to the ICANN Joint Education Committee, the reappointment of Alice Tinker Parker to the ICANN Joint Education Committee, the reappointment of R. Shane Ritter to the ICANN Joint Education Committee, repeal Resolution 2014-08-18-122, and amending Section 22 of the Kankakee County Code related to food sanitation inspections.
Alrighty, we have the motion in the second, and it requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Tripp.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Legess.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mrs. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye, motion carries. Under PZA, ZBA case number 18-37. A request for rezoning from A1 Ag District to A2 Ag Estate District on a parcel generally situated in Section 7 of Yellowhead Township on parcel 0104 07 100 023. Petitioner is Dan Eckhoff, property owner and applicant. And is there any, could you run through this one real quick for us?
I can't. Switch over. All right, this is a request for rezoning from A1 agriculture to A2 agricultural estate.
Oh, my fault, sorry.
All right, is that better?
Oh, yes.
All right. This is a request for rezoning from A1 agriculture to A2 agricultural estate on an 8-acre parcel in Yellowhead Township, outlined in red on the map up there. Mr. Dan Eckhoff owns the property. He has a pole barn already existing on site and wishes to build a single-family home for his family on the property. Zoning board heard this request on September 24th, and there were no objections, and they voted 6-0 to recommend approval.
First, we need a motion to approve. Then we get into questions. Ms. Dunbar, second, Mr. Byrne. Any questions on this particular property and proposition? Okay, I guess seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 18-38, request for rezoning from, is that I1 Light Industrial District to A1 Ag District, and a special use permit number 121-99C34 in the A1 Ag District on a parcel generally situated in sections 13 of Kankakee Township on parcel number 16-16-13-200-003. Petitioners are Silk Row Holdings, 5 LP, care of Rob Rotering, property owner, and Gar Creek Solar LLC, care of Trajectory Energy Partners LLC, applicant. Alrighty.
Okay. It's a request for a special use permit for a 2-megawatt solar facility on the property outlined in red on the map up there, which is just outside the city of Kankakee's boundaries. That brown area is the city of Kankakee. BASF Industries is on that property, BAF. And it's a request for rezoning from I1 Light Industrial to A1 Agriculture. This petition was heard on September 24th as well. There were no objectors present, and the Zoning Board of Appeals voted 6-0 to recommend approval. They did fail to place conditions upon it. At the Planning and Zoning Committee, they did put 2 conditions on the property, or on the project. 1, all ground cover established on the site shall be of a type which is pollinator friendly to help support agriculture. And 2, all landscaping shall abide by any and all rules as outlined in the weed and grass control plan and is subject to the same penalties as weed and grass.
All right. So on that one, I would need a motion to approve as well. Mr. Mulcahy, second. Mr. Fairfield. Any questions about this particular site? Mr. Legess?
Did the city of Kankakee have any objections?
They did not.
Any other questions? Alrighty then, I guess, a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to ZBA case 18-39, request for a special use permit, number 121-99C34, solar farm known as Sandy Farm Solar Farm in the A1 Ag District on a parcel generally situated in section 8 of Aroma Township, parcel number 12-18-08-200-007. Petitioners are Standard Bacon Trust, number 6970, property owner, and Community Power Group LLC, applicant.
Okay. You probably recognize this one as the ZBA case 1801 that you heard over the summer. That one was voted down by the county board. The petitioner or applicant decided to resubmit a new application, which is 1839. So everything that happened in 1801 belongs to that case. This is a new case entirely. They've moved the entire solar farm, it's 2 megawatts, all the way back to the back corner of the property as outlined in blue. Let's see. It is a special use permit. It was heard on September 24th as well. No objectors were present, but there were a few folks that actually spoke at the public hearing. This is Sandy Trubach. Had some questions about how it would affect her property values, and those questions were answered, and she seemed satisfied. Mr. Fred Pitts, also an adjoining property owner, stated that a field tile was broken in the area, and the applicant stated that a tile survey would be performed prior to the issuance of a building permit, and broken tiles would be located. Mr. Mark Walcott, a county resident, stated he was in full support of the project and commends the developer for his effort. Steve Magruder, a county resident, asked if union labor would be used. The answer was yes. And Mike Morgan, an adjoining property owner, had concerns about the fence and its effects on wildlife.
Alrighty, before we get into discussion, is there a motion to approve?
Excuse me. Zoning board voted 6-0 with conditions.
Okay, what were the conditions?
Conditions were the same two I stated earlier. I can restate them. And condition number 1, all ground cover established on the site shall be a type which is pollinator friendly to help support agriculture. Number 2, all landscaping shall abide by any and all rules as outlined in the weed and grass control plan and is subject to the same penalties as weed and grass. And number 3, a 6-foot tall game style fence shall be used in lieu of the required 8-foot chain link fence.
At this point, is there that motion to approve? Mr. Kinzinger, a second. Mr. Fairfield. Now discussion. Mrs. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dell, how far is it from the top of the blue line to at the very top of where the red line is? What is that distance there?
A little less than well, the whole property is about a quarter mile wide, so it's probably around 900 feet. There's a natural tree line there too to the north of the blue. They did testify that they were hiring Snyder Nursery to develop a landscaping plan to go around the solar farm so that it would not be seen by any area residents.
And that's all farmland around it that gets farmed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Parker.
Could you explain the access road to this and how it's going to affect?
I may have the actual site
so.
plan here. But I believe it comes in just north of north of that home up there, and does a dog leg down to the south property line.
Apparently I do not have it.
Send us back. You send it back.
It would come in somewhere around here, would be the entrance, and drop down to this line and run straight back along that property line. Inside the red property line? Yes. As far as I know. Keep in mind, this is a preliminary site plan for zoning purposes.
And final engineering has not been done.
As with all the solar farms.
As it is with all of them.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delbert, can you tell me how far away this site plan would be from the site we already approved off of Highland Road? Or off of Vandercar Road? Across from the golf course?
That one sits on the property.
Maybe on your little bitty map
Just
over there?
off the map, actually.
Yeah.
There's another one approved on this property here, but it sits probably over here.
Okay.
A quarter mile to the west or to the east.
Do you believe, in your opinion, that all of those will be permitted?
No.
Thank you.
We're hearing 1 and 7.
Mr. Legess, we'll come back.
As far as the road goes, that'll be on private property?
It would be a driveway, not a road, yes.
So there's no we have no control over it, no specifications, they can build it any way they want, or do they have to comply with?
They have to get an entrance permit at the road for where they're putting the entrance in. It has to meet the zoning requirements for spacing. But once it's on the property, they can
It could be
pretty much
gravel,
put it anywhere they want
it
to.
could be gravel, blacktop.
Certainly.
anything.
Any other questions on this property, Ms. Parker?
Can we have a voice vote on this?
I'm sorry?
A voice vote on this, Chairman?
I have one more question.
It will be, yes.
I mean, roll call vote.
Oh, a roll call.
Roll call,
That's
please.
fine. When we get there, I'd be happy to. Yeah. Mr. Legess.
Yeah, just one more. If they wanted to expand the solar farm on that location, would they have to come back and go through the same process again?
That would be another special use permit.
Thank you.
We have a couple of them doing that now.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? All right, then, we'll go through a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Tripp?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Legess?
Aye.
Mr. Vickery?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Tholen?
Aye.
Mrs. Polk? Mr. Mulcahy?
Aye.
Mr. Snipes?
Aye.
Mr. Byrne?
Aye.
Mr. Seroy?
Nay.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand?
Aye.
Mrs. Weber?
Aye.
Mrs. Peters?
Aye.
Mrs. Evans? Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Mrs. Parker?
Nay.
Ms. Dunbar?
Nay.
Mr. Kinzinger? Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Zenz?
Nay.
Ms. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on, authority for County Board Chairman to sign an intergovernmental agreement between Kankakee County and the City of Momence for Historic Preservation Program. Motion to approve that to start off with Mr. Payton, second Mr. Vickery. Is there any questions about this? Went through committee. No? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Alrighty. Under finance, our annual tax levy. If we could read that, just the title into the record, please. Oh, annual tax levy? That's the title I just did, sorry.
I'm not splitting
Mr. Graham is very succinct in his titling of these resolutions. Mr. Graham Quinn, excuse me. Alrighty, so basically this is this year's tax levy. Need a motion to approve first. Mr. Burns, second, Mr. Washington. Is there any questions about any of that document? We went all through it in finance. Just want to make sure everybody's on understanding this. Any questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Tripp. Aye. Mr. Washington. Aye. Mr. Lejes.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mrs. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to the budget. The combined annual budget and appropriation ordinance for Kankakee County, Illinois, 2018-2019 fiscal year. I need a motion to approve the budget to start with. Ms. Dunbar, second. Mr. Lejes. I guess any specific questions of this, it's been on file on Republic Review. We did make a minor adjustment to account for the new drug court grant, so we need somebody in the public defender's office. That's the only change between the time finance saw it, and it's been on display the whole time. So anything else? All right, that's a roll call vote.
Mr. Tripp.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Lejes.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mrs. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Under insurance and renewals, we have the FY19 employee insurance renewals and resolutions. Is that a separate presentation we have together, or is that all just all in the packet? It's all in the packet, okay. Make sure if anybody I guess first let's get a motion to approve the authorizing the county board chairman or his designee to sign an agreement with United Healthcare for medical insurance for Kankakee County employees and officials who qualify for medical insurance. Mr. Lejes, Mr. Tripp. That one actually went down a little bit since our finance committee meeting because Mr. Seroy couldn't take no for an answer. And so we went back and beat him up even a little bit more. And I think we got about a point shaved off of it. So cupcakes are coming your way there, Todd. So no, and I will say that would, you know, we're doing very well. We got another month experience, and I would say this is a trend. We were at about 67% this past month. I believe that was the number. So we're doing pretty well on how we're managing the cost for the employees and for the county as well. So I guess we have a motion to approve that and a second. Any questions? Roll call vote.
Mr. Tripp.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Lejes.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mrs. Evans. Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. The next item, health spending account contributions for FY 2018-2019. No changes there. It'll be $500 for the employee, $1,000 for the additional tiers. It's a managed cost mechanism to get people into HSAs. That's typical of what we've done in the past. Is there a motion to approve this one? Let's see, Mr. Fairfield and Mr. Payton. Any other questions? All right, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Tripp.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Lejes.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mrs. Evans. Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item is authorizing the county board chairman or his designee to sign an agreement with Delta Dental to provide dental services for county employees and officials qualified. Sorry about that. I skipped one. I had already circled it. It's the FSA contract for FY 2018-2019. So I need a motion to approve that. Ms. Parker, second. Mr. Tholen. Take a look at that one here. I believe we had a
Flexible spending account, 218.
yeah, the FSA.
No.
I want to make sure I got the right one here. Yeah, it's $3.90 per participant. And that's whoever participates, there's an admin fee. So that's we're just authorizing that payment. Any questions about that? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Tripp.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. LaJoss.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mrs. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on, authorizing the county board chairman or his designee to sign an agreement with Delta Dental, provide dental insurance for county employees and officials qualified for dental insurance. It's a voluntary plan. Need a motion to approve. Mrs. Evans, Mr. Fairfield. Well, I guess brace yourself. See what I did there? We had a price decrease. So, see what I did there? Sorry. So some of you guys are paying attention. So we had a price decrease, which is nice. We don't expect that every year, obviously, but it's the first time in quite a long time, exactly. And we do self-insure that, so that is including admin fees. So, without any questions, roll call vote. Did you have a question, Mr. Snipes? Okay.
Mr. Tripp.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. LaJoss. Mr. LaJoss.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Present.
Aye.
Mr. Hess. Mr. Tholen. Mrs. Polk. Mr. Mulcahy.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mrs. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Our vision care insurance for county employees and officials qualified for insurance. This is purely voluntary, and I believe it's the last year of a 3-year deal. All right, so this is really obviously no change. So a motion to approve on that one would be in order. Ms. Haas. Second, Mr. Washington. That's another roll call vote.
Mr. Tripp.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. LaJoss. Mr. Vickery.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mrs. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. And last item under finance is the renewal of the FY19 liability auto workers comp insurance. George Ryan Jr., we have a little bit to show you guys here regarding what we had and what we have now, and some of the changes. Need one of those little hourglass things.
30-second one. 30-second hourglass.
Yeah, rent's too high.
I'm George Ryan Jr. I'm your local insurance agent, representing the Illinois Counties Risk Management Trust. And this is Todd Greer with IPMG, who is basically the master of the program that we put together for you a little over 2.5 years ago. At the time we came here, we saved you about $500,000 in premium, and we increased your limits. We're back again this year with an increase in limits and a decrease in premium. There's a chart there that shows a little bit about what we did a couple of years ago. So this year we're coming back with a reduction across the board of about $52,000 this year. Todd, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, a couple years ago when we first met you, I think I said something that shocked a few people. I said you were paying way too much for your insurance, and it would be our goal over the next few years to try and work it down. We're well on our way to doing that. I really want to compliment and thank your department heads and the guidance of the board. Your departments have worked really hard with our risk management staff, notably the Sheriff's Department and the jail command staff. They've engaged in the risk management suggestions we've made. They've done a lot of training to try and improve the safety, which reduces the amount of losses, which drives down the premium. So it makes our job easy when you have employees who embrace what we're trying to work with them and work with us to achieve the results. So thank you to you all.
Thank you. Is there any questions for these folks? Motion to approve, Mr. Hess, a second. Mr. Zenz, typically, I guess a question I have is when you have a population increase, wouldn't you normally see your total spend go up instead of down?
In general, yes, because a lot of it's budget driven and exposure driven.
Right.
So as that goes up, generally the premium does go up.
And in this case, it was inverse of that, and which probably sheds light to what you were saying.
Yeah, it was loss driven in your instance, yes.
Yeah, okay. So, any questions? Ms. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't, thank you.
You're on now, sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
If I hit all the buttons, then soon. Go on.
I don't have a question for these gentlemen, just a procedural question.
Yeah.
There's no resolution in the packet. Do we need a resolution for that?
It's a good question. We can, it was a vote, but yeah, there should be a resolution that goes with it.
There's not.
Okay. Yeah, there should
FYI.
be a resolution for that.
So
But it's just,
can we go ahead and vote on it without the resolution?
yeah, we can just,
Okay.
we can draw that up.
Okay, just,
It's a renewal, so it's,
oh,
yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah, and if somebody wonders about like bidding and things like that, I thought maybe somebody would ask about that. These are the type of insurances you don't bid every single year because the market then tends to downgrade you, if you will. You're not the type of client that people want to have, so you get high prices.
Understood.
So if you get a big increase, I'm sure that these folks will come to us and say, let's go to the market.
And we're certainly never opposed to that. One of the things Todd's very proud of is that he represents his program. I mentioned this the first year several times. That they write over, I think, 56 counties out of 103 in the state of Illinois, and every county that's the same. I use the term size and scope of Kankakee County. So they're good at what they do. They're fair in their cost projections, and if it comes to a point where the market hardens and we get into a problem where we have a lot of losses and we're going to start to see our premiums increase, that time you might want to look somewhere else. But most of their customers have been with them what? On average?
We average about 95%, so usually they stay with us 19 years if they join us.
See you in 19 years.
So I think we had a motion and a second. Do we have that on there? Motion and a second. Okay. Yep. Yes, we did. We had the right side of the room, my left. Yeah. So that'll be a roll call just to make sure.
Mr. Tripp?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Legess? Aye. Mr. Vickery?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Tholen?
Aye.
Mrs. Polk?
Aye.
Mr. Mulcahy?
Aye.
Mr. Snipes?
Aye.
Mr. Byrne?
Aye.
Mr. Seroy?
Aye.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand?
Aye.
Mrs. Weber?
Aye.
Mrs. Peters?
Aye.
Mrs. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Under other business, one opening on the Kankakee County Board, District Number 7, due to the resignation of James Stauffenberg. 2 openings on the Kankakee County Regional Planning Commission, 1 opening on the Gar Creek Drainage District, 2 openings on the Mantino Drainage District Number 3, 1 opening on the Mantino Drainage District Number 9, 1 opening on the McGilvery Drainage District, 1 on the Minnie Creek Drainage District, another on the Moments and Yellowhead Drainage District, 2 openings on the Bourbonnais Fire Protection District, 2 openings on the Essex Fire Protection District, and 1 opening on the Ethics Commission. So that's what we have there on those announcements. Any old business before you come back before the board? Any new business? Mr. Legess, did you have something that you want to add to the conversation?
I'd like to adjourn.
Okay. Do I have a second for that motion to adjourn? Mr. Mulcahy?
If I can't have it first, I don't want a second.
Oh, Mr. Snipes.
Hey, it's his last meeting, so I could care less.
Oh, wow. You should have let him have it the last meeting. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Those opposed? Yeah.